Hello and welcome to Press Start Turbo. Later this episode, we're talking to Manuela, a technical artist and graphics programmer who worked on games from Among Us VR to I Am Your Beast. She's gonna help us understand her field a little better. But before we jump into that, I'm joined by Billy and Brendan of The Crawl.
Yep.
Yeah, not for long. My chair's gonna fucking explode up my ass and I'm gonna die.
Okay.
That's what a lot of people do.
Pre-grave gaming on the chair, pneumatic tubes.
Any moment is dangerous. I've never been more horrified of fucking pneumatic tubes in my goddamn life. The pre-show was literally like 30 minutes of us going, "Can you die from an explosion, an office chair explosion?" Because I didn't know it was a thing until Brendan mentioned it. And now I've never been more scared of my fucking life.
Gamers should get hazard pay. It's all I'm saying.
You should get...
Oh, it's so true. Listen, boss, either I get the standing desk or you're giving me hazard pay for sitting in this chair.
A really good lawyer could probably make an argument for that. You could probably do that.
Yeah, dude.
I feel like they'll just stand up. Maybe, I don't know.
Just stand up.
Well, see, that's the thing is
then
if you
have to buy a standing desk.
If you have an employer that refuses to buy you a standing desk and you're asking them to, you just go to your lawyer and you create an argument that sitting all day requires hazard pay because that pneumatic tube might shoot through you and get lodged in your guts.
Yeah.
The worst part is I don't know if it's some chairs probably aren't pressurized enough to where it would like hit your brain, like it would get stuck in your chest. You would be alive and it would suck.
Oh, that would be worse because then you just have a fucking giant hole up your ass.
Right. Like if it goes, like if it's over.
I mean, if you're lucky, because if you're not in the perfect position for it to go up your ass, it might just like, if you're like completely in the back, it can just go up your dick and balls. And
I think, like it'll destroy your dick and balls. Or if you're just sitting over it right, it'll probably go through your taint and like lodge itself in its
That's also awful.
In your guts.
You'd look like the puppet man from Dead Silence.
God. Anyway.
This is a gaming podcast.
This is a gaming podcast. We're a bunch of gamers. What have we been gaming?
You could be gaming and die right now. Right now, you could be listening. If you're in your office chair right now,
listening to this podcast.
Comment below if you died or you just have the fucking pneumatic tube up your ass right now. And let us know if you survive.
Anyway,
video game.
When they say sitting kills, it's the silent killer.
It's the silent killer.
Anyway, I got to play Monster Hunter Wilds.
Whoa!
the Monster Hunter Wilds beta. Me and I think it was peaked at like 400,000 concurrent players on Steam charts.
Oh my god, 400,000.
Yeah,
really?
I think it topped
and that's not even counting the PlayStation.
That's not counting PlayStation.
Yeah, I played it on PlayStation.
I don't have much to say about Monster Hunter Wilds because I am. Wait, it's Wilds, right?
Mm-hmm. It is Wilds. Yeah. It is really annoying. Hollywood for a W again.
I know. That's why it keeps confusing me. But yeah, no, I didn't play it because I want to go into it as blind as possible. That's how I've been enjoying games lately. Just literally look at nothing.
See, I was the same way about the trailers, but actually I felt differently about like obviously getting to play it. Because like there's I remember hearing about it in GDC talk, but it's like the idea that you start playing a game the first second that you hear about it.
Yeah,
because like, you know, marketing and all of that goes into development and it changes how your perspective is and stuff like that. But I'm like I'm not a very long time Monster Hunter fan. I feel like it is now. I
started at like World.
I started at World like a lot of other people.
When did World come out? Like 5 years ago, 6 years ago?
I want to say
it was 2018, I think.
2018,
yeah.
2017.
So a good 6 years.
Yeah.
All right.
But you know, and that game has, like, as much as I like it, it has a lot of issues.
I love wasting time to find pink Rathium tracks. That was awesome.
The eating mechanics made no fucking sense. You couldn't skip cutscenes. Connecting with your friends and actually playing together was a hassle for a game that's a multiplayer game.
Yeah.
A bunch of issues. A lot of them got solved in Rise, but then that game was, it's the offshoot kind of the other ones, and it did its own thing.
Yeah.
It had its own problems too.
It also had its own problems. But Wilds, at least of what I've played in the beta so far, is like the most promising thing I can think of for them to do after, because this is the World team primarily.
Yeah.
For them to do after World, they've like really, it seems like they have thought about just quality of life, what people want, how to make this game both more approachable, but also still have the kind of depth that Monster Hunter games are kind of known for. And Brendan, you got to play it as well, right?
Yeah, I did. I only played one day of it during the early access PSN beta. I did like all the hunts, basically everything you could do, all the major things you could do in the beta. I did it.
Yeah, and how are you feeling after that?
That's a good question. I really
are we gonna get a hot take?
No, not a hot take. It's
Okay.
It's just such a brief. Okay, so I've been playing Monster Hunter since the first generation. I've been playing since the first games.
Oh, seriously? Like,
Yeah.
are you mean like on PS2 era? Like,
Yeah, PS2 and PSP.
like baby boy Brendan with his little PS2 controller.
I mean, yeah. I'm a little bit
Damn.
older than you, so but yes. So I wasn't, yeah,
I mean, yeah, but but not that old. Like those games are still like almost like
Yeah, I mean,
20
I was
years old.
yeah, I was
You know
I was
what I mean?
let's see, how old was I when it came the first one came out? I was probably like 9 or 10, I think.
Yeah, that's
maybe.
baby boy. That's baby boy age.
You're right. You're
That's
right.
like
You're right.
That's baby boy age. That's around the same time I started playing Apis
Wait,
game.
no, I must have been older. Hold on.
No, he was 9.5.
You're just aren't you just like 4 years older than me? How old are you?
I'm 48 in June. That's not.
That's not. I actually believed you. I was like, that's not fucking right.
So according to Google, when it came out in North America, I was 13.
that's still baby boy age.
Yeah.
Anything under 15, 16 is baby boy age. I'm gonna be honest.
I don't know how to respond to that.
Just keep going.
Yeah. So a Monster Hunter. Yeah.
Yeah, so Monster Hunter Wilds, and actually, so I have this feeling about every single Monster Hunter beta I've ever played. So, back to like Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate was the first beta I remember they put out. And betas are really bad at showing what a Monster Hunter game is. This one does the
100%.
best. Yeah. This one does the best, I think, but so much of the stuff that I love about Monster Hunter is the gear progression loop, the crafting, the build crafting and all that, and a lot of the fiddly extra shit you have to do on the sides. I really like that stuff. I know you guys mentioned it too, that, there was a lot of divisiveness about hunting, like actually having to track and hunt the monsters in World. I quite enjoyed that.
Well, okay, it depends which kind of hunting, because I think tracking the monster on a per hunt basis was very fun.
Yeah.
But I really did not like the Pink Rathian specifically, because what you had to do was literally find tracks in unrelated. How many did you have to find?
Right, like the investigation things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was not good.
Yeah, you had to do like almost 20 fucking hunts to get the right amount of footsteps or footprints rather, and it was just not fun.
No, I agree with that 100%.
It halted progress, but I did really, really like tracking. I think Rise is fun, but Rise just shows you where the monster is and you just go at it.
Right.
And I think Rise would have been so much better if you could do the tracking, especially so because of the fact that you had the wire bugs, and the movement in that game is so fucking fun. And I feel like tracking with that movement would have been amazing.
Oh, yeah. Some of the stuff about the beta that I was impressed with is that it actually did give a little bit more of an idea of what the game loop might be like outside of the hunting, like just the fighting, which like most Monster Hunter betas are like, here, go fight 3 monsters and you can pick
With the worst gear you could ever
or it's just like,
imagine.
the gear doesn't really matter necessarily. Anyway, so like in this one, there were three or four armor sets you could mix and match from.
Yeah.
You know, I went switch axe because I always go switch axe. And so, you know, you got a little bit more of that. But the part that I was most interested in was just how much of an open world kind of game is it going to be? And where I kind of ended up feeling the most comparison to was Metal Gear Solid 5.
That is
interesting.
High fucking praise.
And it's because of the way that, like, you can just go out there and fuck around and do stuff. But there's not like big markers or anything to do like, hey, yeah, go here and clear out this encampment and you'll get 5 currency to go take back and like Far Cry type shit.
Yeah.
This is more like, hey, you can just go out and do stuff and, you want to hunt this thing? Just take on a hunt out in the middle of nowhere. And you can...
Dragon's Dogma question mark?
Maybe a little bit of Dragon's Dogma, especially the fact that they're using the RE engine.
Yeah.
It looks quite a bit like Dragon's Dogma at times. But there's just things about the way that you exist in these zones that reminded me of how Metal Gear Solid just felt like I was an operative out in the middle of a desert and I could take on a mission to go do this thing. I could get airdropped supplies to keep going, or I could go back to base and do a more like holistic refresh of my gear and whatever. And that holistic refresh, that type of stuff was not in the beta, but some of that, like I can set up a little bit of, or a little camp here, or I can, you know, replenish my meals out in the field and whatnot.
You can like pop up a little tent in the...
Kind of.
In some locations, you're able to do that.
Oh.
And it's kind of like a mini camp away from the main settlement.
Yeah.
And, you know, it allows you to do some things that you can do when you go back to camp. So that's kind of what I mean of like, it's like almost like camping in Dragon's Dogma, where like you can refresh yourself and... eat a meal, up your stats a little bit to continue on your adventure or whatever. That was the part that I'm the most interested in. It was such a small taste, and I purposefully just played it once to get a good idea of what this game was, because so much of the trailers made it seem like it was going to be The Last of Us, but Monster Hunter. And it's still like, it's just very cinematic. Do you know what I mean? Like it looks so cinematic and directed in a way that there is one mission that is very directed, but the rest of the game is just, I was just out there hunting stuff. And if that's most of what that game is going to be, I am like very excited and very optimistic about the game in that way. I don't know how like the move sets and all that other like really granular stuff that honestly Super Rad would be better to talk about and to speak to than I would be. But yeah, that's the main core loop. I'm feeling pretty good about it.
Okay. I've been literally avoiding as much as possible, so I haven't seen many trailers outside of the trailers we saw during, like, you know, when we stream the Game Awards. Sometimes I'm gonna see a trailer for Monster Hunter. I'm not gonna look away from it. Like that's fucking insane. So I did see those, but those are that's like the only stuff I've seen, and I do remember it being like, "Whoa, Hunter, use your fucking gun on this monster right now," and it was like very scripted. I see what you mean.
Yeah, that was like the first mission that they put you through at the start of the beta, which is, I think that was them showing off like, hey, this is the new direction we're going to take the storytelling with this new Monster Hunter game. It's going to be more cinematic. Your character's going to talk now. The cats also talk now.
Excuse me?
There's dialogue options.
Yeah.
They talk? There's voice acting on the fucking Palico?
You can turn it off.
Why would you ever? Is it,
because
Wait.
because they're talking cats. I mean, they say meowster.
Yeah, some of us might like the way that they sounded in the old games, and they just brought that sound back. That like, back,
it's great. It's great.
Yeah.
I love that, and I love that your hunter can just like understand them. Just friggin'.
Oh, okay. Because otherwise they go like meow.
No, they just speak English. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, they literally
like
they
it's the
sound like a
friggin'
meow.
Monster Hunter
Yeah, but
movie.
they do puns for sure.
They're
right?
Meowth from Pokemon. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, they're literally Meowth from.
Yeah.
I don't hate that. It's fine.
Yeah,
I might turn it off after like the second hunt.
It's not bad. It's just different, you know.
I am actually interested in seeing what they do with the story, because a story to me has never worked in any of the Monster Hunter games I've played. It's just, especially, I mean, World was specifically atrocious. Rise was whatever. Like at least they had cool intros for the monsters. It's just like all the stuff back at the town, I'm just like spamming dialogue. Like I don't know who. I couldn't name any of the characters in your home base.
And in like games before those, like in 3 Ultimate and 4 Ultimate and all the way back, a lot of the story was just like, hey, some villagers need to go up into the mountains. Can you go kill this thing that keeps killing caravans so that we can take supplies to the next village?
I see.
It's stuff like that. It was very like, stage setting, window dressing.
It was basically just giving like the most basic context to the gameplay.
Yeah.
I'm interested in seeing if the story is good, because if I'm honest, like I tried with Worlds the first time, and I remember picking up the game from my roommate's PS4, playing it, and being like, oh my god, why do people... I did play solo, though, to be fair. I played solo campaign, and I was paying the most attention possible for the story, and I was like, Jesus Christ, I can't believe people like this game. I was like, I cannot believe people like this game, and obviously later I came back. Thank God.
My main feeling about like why that doesn't work is just because you're such a passive. You like inherently have to be such a passive voice,
100%
in the story, and like there isn't any like actual agency that any characters have. It's just kind of stuff happens to facilitate the fact that you get to kill a bunch of monsters, and at least this time they've, at least from what we've seen so far, they're facilitating that kind of fantasy of what it is to be this hunter in this world where you're giant monsters, and then you get this new people who are like, wow, what are these giant fucking swords you guys have? That's crazy. We just like hide from these dudes.
Okay.
So like it's interesting there. But in terms of like how it actually plays, I think all of the quality of life stuff has just hit. Like the fact that your handler is following you around and you can post quests from anywhere, and that hitting.
Oh my god, that sounds so fucking nice.
Brendan talked about the camps in previous. There were in previous games. There was less of them, but the way they used to work is that you'd have to complete a sub quest, which would be like, pick up fucking 5 fossils from this specific map and bring them back to me.
Yeah, and
then you can have a camp. Now it's just you just give like some cats $200 and then they make you a tent for you in front of you immediately. So like it's there's just like a bunch of small stuff like that, like having the you can wear whatever gendered armor that you want. It's just like great. You can mix and match it. There's so much customization options now. All of that stuff, and like having the it's just like it's got me really, really excited for it, because it's just like all of these like the biggest problem that every Monster Hunter fan has is getting their friends to play the game.
Dude,
and
oh my god, yes.
For so many of these games, the barrier, well, it's expensive, and then once you actually get them to play it, there's all these like stuff that you have to say to them, like, no, don't worry about that stuff. It's about to get really good. Like, you just have to bear with me.
Yeah,
I promise
to you, it's gonna get.
I literally tried for the better part of 2 decades to get my friends to play these fucking games, and then World came out and reviewed really well, and it was on a console, not on 3DS, and people were like, oh, this is cool. And then finally I had friends who played that game, and that was mind-blowing. But yes, it's still, even so, there's such a barrier to entry, and I do think that obviously the full release might be different, but in terms of how they structured the beta, this was the best taste of a Monster Hunter that a beta has given. I know I said earlier, like, it doesn't really give you the full experience, and that's true here. Like, it still is mostly focused on the fighting, and it kind of cuts out a lot of the ancillary stuff that I, am most interested in. But my friends who are like, I've never played Monster Hunter before, and I'm going to try this out, I think that starting it with the first mission of the game, where it's very cinematic and bombastic, and it introduces you to all, like, the core combat mechanics and, like, what your hunter can do out in the field very quickly. You don't have to go on like 3 specific missions to learn how to gather things, and there's none of that. It all just kind of just happens. That was good onboarding, or at least the best onboarding so far.
Oh yes, and even for like how you pick your first weapon is just really smart the way they do it. They give you your handler basically asks you just before you go out on your first mission. It's like, hey, so have you decided your weapon yet? And then you say like, no, I haven't. And she's like, oh, well, just let me ask you a few questions to see what weapon I think will suit you. And you basically answer these lists, and then they'll give you like a weapon depending on what you answer. So like, you know, because there's 15. Wait, how many? No. But there's a lot of weapons, so it's really daunting for new players, especially when each of them have like the best way to describe it is each weapon is a class in an RPG. Like you have a completely different moveset and play style than another weapon. So sorry, how many did you say?
Well, there's 18 throughout the whole series.
That's
okay.
And that includes a few that are only on some of the like the online, like the Chinese only online.
Oh, Monster Hunter Online. Gotcha.
There's 14. Okay, I just found 14? There's 14 in this in Wilds.
Yeah, that's like to someone who you're trying to introduce to the game. They're like, well, what the fuck? You know, like, and then you've got to stick with that weapon.
Yeah, especially they're all drastically fucking different. Like, if you pick the wrong weapon when you start out, you're probably going to have a really bad time.
Dude,
especially if it's a very technical weapon. Because I remember when I started the first time on Worlds, I was playing, I wanted to see, I think it was, I think I started with the longsword, and the tutorialization was pretty fucking bad.
It's terrible in World.
And then when I got the Insect Glaive, which is a significantly flashier and easier to use weapon, it clicked way better and easier for me. It's really important for Monster Hunter to introduce its weapons and tutorializes them well.
Yeah,
and I'm glad if they fix that problem in the new one, that's going to be a big thing.
I will end just to wrap it up on two negatives that I like. It is a beta, like I'll give it the caveat of that, but like one of the things that worries me the most is the performance. And how it's running, because like World had the same issues as well, and I feel like a lot of people thought it might be alleviated by the transition to RE Engine, but that's obviously not how game development works, or making video games work. And I know a lot of people have had issues with the beta, and I had some performance stuff, even though my computer is pretty beefy. And on PlayStation as well. Like, it has a performance mode. It is a very muddy looking performance mode, I would say.
Wasn't there an issue with like ray tracing being on by default?
Yeah.
And I mean, you couldn't turn it off.
That's also true of Dragon's Dogma.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember seeing somewhere that they will be disabling that. Like, they will be adding an RT option in the game.
Okay, that's good.
And that's probably that's probably for the best. Honestly, I didn't hate it. The the PS5 performance, it was okay. Certainly not the best, and it could be better. I didn't notice a huge difference, frankly, between performance mode and resolution mode when it came to certainly some fuzziness, but the frame rate was like very similar between the two, but performance offered just a bit more smoothness at times to where it did feel a little bit better. I don't know. I think obviously the PS5 Pro will alleviate a lot of these issues just by virtue of the fact that it's a slightly stronger machine. So I guess if someone has that, like, that won't be an issue. But
yeah, if the bourgeoisie will be playing in 60 FPS.
Yes. But I was actually, I mean, to be honest, based upon how some of the early footage looked and based upon how Dragon's Dogma, as much as I love that game, it's my favorite game of this year.
It ran like fucking garbage.
It just doesn't run very well. And so I was worried about it, and I was actually I came away more encouraged by its performance than I was. Yeah, because I was worried that we were going to be in like the 20 to 30 frame rate range in some of that, and it was not that. It was like, I think I probably in performance mode was probably getting around 40 to 50 at most times.
Yeah,
which is, you know, it's not 60, but it's certainly better than like 30.
Yeah. The other thing as well is that I still don't know how I feel about the new lobby system either. where
having
it's
like 100 people or whatever.
Yeah, you have like 100 people in a lobby, and you can see. I don't know. I think it caps out at a certain amount, but you can see a bunch of people just standing around in the main camp, and it's just it feels so MMO to me, but not in like a fun,
not in a good
way.
way.
It's just like, why is this here? Like, why do I suddenly see? Like,
There's actually like 100 people in the lobby.
yes.
How big is a fucking lobby?
So it's not just it's more like, have you played like Phantasy Star Online New Genesis?
Yes.
Okay. So you know how it's like
That's that's
out-
a very specific and niche thing.
well, the reason is because like, I mean, Phantasy Star and Monster Hunter were already very similar, and this is they feel very similar again in this way, where the way that the quote unquote lobby system is, it's more like an instance of the world. So it's you're not like in the town and then loading out into the zone where you're hunting. It's one zone, and you seamlessly leaving the town and like immediately entering this fairly large environment. And it was just a chunk of it in the beta, so it's going to be even bigger in the full game. And I assume there might even be multiple. I have no idea how they're going to structure it. But basically, other people are out there too sometimes. And it's like, they're all kind of like, you might not see them out in the world. I think maybe like you are by yourself out there. Again, I don't know how they're going to structure it, but it's just everyone who's playing on that instance rather than everyone in the town. So like, there are a lot of people in the town, but some of those people who are in your quote unquote lobby are also out hunting or, you know, doing whatever.
I see. And the hunting is like an instance with limited players.
I believe so.
Yeah. So basically,
at least I hope so, because 100% on a fucking map would be insane.
It's not like that.
like if you're in a default lobby, what happens is like, you know, as soon as you leave the home base, you can't see anyone else. You're by yourself. You don't see anyone else running around.
Unless you're grouped with them.
Unless you're grouped with them. And then you start hitting a monster, basically opens up a quest, and then the entire lobby can join it. And then you'll obviously see them if they join it.
And I do like that.
Yes.
How if you see a monster out in the world and you have to do like, you know, a certain amount of damage to it, very low damage to it, and then it says, all right, this is now your quest. And then you get the, you know, after you defeat it, you get the same rewards and the you know, reward screen and all that stuff. I like that.
I like that a lot because it gets rid of the tedious parts of Monster Hunter.
Did you ever get to end game in Monster Hunter World, like Guiding or Iceborne?
Yeah.
Yep.
With Guiding Lands?
It's the Guiding Lands, but bigger.
Yeah, bigger and like more streamlined. But yeah, anyway, overall, pretty excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm more excited about hearing about it than like now that I've heard what you guys have to say about it, and I will still refuse to look at trailers until I get my hands on the game.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna look at any more trailers. I don't want to know about a single other monster. The only monsters I know about is the one in the box and then the ones in the beta, and like obviously one other at least from World, but that's it. And I don't want to know anything else.
Yeah, I like the direction that they're going with some of the monster designs too. It reminds me more of like super fauna than just dinosaurs.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Which is really,
I like that.
It's very cool. And I do, there's one fight, it's like the apex monster of the beta. I had a lot of fun fighting that. It reminded me of farming Nergigante.
And all of the animations as well for the
fight.
monsters and the new animations for the whole game that they've redone.
Ooh, actually,
stunning.
I do have one last question. Are Turf Wars back?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Because those are so fucking awesome. They're so sick. Speaking of sick, shaders are pretty sick, right?
Yeah.
Right? For this episode, we talked with Zibania on Blue Sky and Twitter about being a technical artist. And if you want to learn about shaders, and I'm going to be honest, like that interview actually helped me a lot when I was doing all my game dev starting stuff. I would recommend people stay and check it out because I've never grasped how shaders or technical art worked until we actually did that interview, because she explains it so fucking well.
Yeah. Welcome to the interview portion of the episode. Today we're joined by Manuela. She is a technical artist and graphics programmer who has worked on games from Darkest Dungeon 2 to I Am Your Beast and Among Us VR. Today she's joining us to help shed a light on what it is that tech artists do. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
No worries.
Because God knows we have no idea what
this
you guys
is probably
do. This is the most unprepared we have ever been for an interview ever. I'm going to be honest.
I watched a bunch of stuff on YouTube, but I was like, they started explaining like math stuff, and I was like, okay, it's time to like,
God,
my eyes
so
are
beyond me. It's so beyond me.
Yeah, it's probably one of the least understood parts of making a video game, but that's actually something I've made sort of a mission of mine, is to break down, what graphics in games are and make it easy to understand. I feel like there's some gatekeeping of, if you don't already know how to do it, I don't want to talk to you about it, that I think is a little bad.
I was going to say, just because like from some of the research that I did, a lot of what I understand the tech artist role to be is actually bridging that gap between like different disciplines, right? And like actually being able to communicate those things.
No, the tricky part comes in with the graphics programming, because it's the sort of thing where if you're into graphics programming, you are either like a university level researcher or you're in the entertainment industry. So like there's two extremes. So like there's research done on it and there's papers, but it's all in this really dense, difficult to read academic language. So it's a bit difficult to disseminate that.
If we were to break it down to the simplest, like it's Thanksgiving dinner and you are explaining to your grandma what exactly technical art is, because I think that might help me, at least specifically, because I know like very basic stuff from when I used to work in game studios, and even then it's like it's so vague.
Well, let's put it this way. Computers don't know anything. They're very stupid. We have to tell them everything.
Yeah.
So a computer doesn't know what anything looks like. It doesn't know how to draw anything. And that's what we have, artists for. But how do we tell the computer to do what the artist made? That's when we get the technical art coming in. And I'll give as an example of what I mean of, we need to tell the computer everything. If you have a 3D game that has a 3D mesh, a mesh is actually just like a list of points. There's actually, as far as the data is concerned on the computer, there's no such thing as a face of a mesh. It's just points. So we need to tell the computer to draw it as a 3D object. And that means not just like make it solid where those points are, because then you would not be able to see anything except its silhouette. We need to light it. Well, what does that mean? So we need to tell the computer like, what does it look like to light something? And there's so many ways to do light. What's the style of the light? So that's where sort of the programming aspect of it comes in. So joining that art part of, the artist has an idea of what the light should look like. The technical artist can tell the computer how to make the light look like that.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you've got to figure out the limitations of that as well, right? Because like there might be your artist might have like the wildest dreams imaginable for what like, they want to draw or what wants to be, and then you've got to come in and be like, okay, so this is what is possible, and this is what the limitations of our software or the hardware, or like this has got to run on a PS5, like we can't have like 20 billion characters on screen at once, kind of
Ever since I got started doing VR professionally, a lot of my job has been saying no.
Oh, that's such a
yes, it's sad.
Being the no person is really sad.
Yeah.
Breaking dreams, but also making sure the project is at least possible. So
a lot of if you've talked to other game developers, you know that a lot of game dev is just faking things.
Oh yeah,
like not doing it for real.
It's a magic trick.
The reason why, like, ray tracing, like, what is that? It's that up until recently on a consumer device, it was not feasible to actually have light that worked the way light really works. Mm-hmm. So up until that point, it's just been faked with physically inaccurate means that look good enough. And, you can be a perfectionist all you like, but part of making a video game is being satisfied with good enough.
I imagine like you're talking about specifically working on VR titles. I imagine like some of those issues are not extrapolated, whatever that word works, like or enhanced when working on those, because the level of scrutiny from the consumer side is just like crazy. Some objects that in traditional games that you wouldn't even that don't need to be picked up and like turned around and have every single like face of it be rendered. Now you have to do that.
Yeah.
And now you can just bring your face right up to every little detail and just nitpick all you want.
And the difficulty comes in the fact that the hardware is weaker than a typical PC. So you've got that double whammy of what you just mentioned, plus you don't have such powerful hardware. So a lot of it is sort of the magician's trick of misdirection of look at this so you don't look at that. And art is very important there of, it's an artist who can imagine how to misdirect someone's attention, and then it's, the programming side of you implement it. And so one thing I really like about tech art is, as y'all mentioned, it is sort of the gap between the two. And so I'm basically like an engineer who knows how to talk to artists and an artist who knows how to talk to engineers.
Yeah. And how do you get to be in that role? What was your pathway to tech artistry?
I have a very unusual tech origin story. I didn't study anything STEM related in college. I've got a Bachelor of Arts. It's something totally unrelated. But when I was in my mid-20s, I got interested in making games for like game jams. And so I wanted to do an effect that I thought was really simple. Like, how do I fade the screen? And I had found out I have to use a shader. This was a bit like Unity existed, but it was kind of primitive. So this was in a game engine called XNA, where you have to kind of do everything yourself. And so I looked up, how do I make a shader? There's nothing written on how to make a shader. There's just find a shader, put it in. And I didn't understand it at all. If you've ever looked at shader code, if you don't know what you're looking at, it looks like nonsense. And that made me so mad that I spent all my free time for a few months just focusing on that. And I thought, well, I'm still not good enough, but maybe I can just make it work. Then I started talking to people and I found out that actually I'd somehow become really, really good at it instead. Usually. So what happened is whatever the math or the thinking involved, it just agrees with me, I guess. So I find it very intuitive. So I picked it up much faster than is typical.
That's awesome.
And just from there, you just applied that.
Yeah, so originally I just started making stuff for myself and posting it online, but then people started trying to hire me as a contractor, to make this cool thing for my game too. So I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And so I ended up contracting so much that I realized, I can just quit my day job, do this all the time. And so I was just freelancing for 2 years there, and then I was offered employment, and I got tired of using the marketplace for insurance. So it was like, yes. It's a uniquely American story, yes.
And what were some of your first games that you've worked on in that role?
Dungeon Golf was actually the first freelance project I worked on, even though it came out just a few months ago.
Oh, wow. But
my work on it was done in 2019. And I made the shaders for that game. And let's see, there's Darkest Dungeon 2, of course. I've freelanced on more games than I can remember. There's Hat Gentleman, shoot, that was another early one.
It's one of those things where it's like, man, I've been around the block.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember what I worked on. Sometimes people bring up stuff to me and I'm like, I did that? What the hell was I doing back then,
Well, it's also funny, you get, people who are aspiring game developers who never quite make the jump, and they don't realize that all you have to do is just actually do it instead of wishing you could do it. And so among such people, you'll find if they did anything that was contributing to one video game, they'll brag about that endlessly. If you meet them at an in-person meetup for video game things, focus. I did this on one video game, but if you're actually in the industry, you work on so many games, you can't even remember all the titles.
What was I'm kind of interested because the Dungeon Golf, looking at screenshots from it, the art style and type of rasterization it's using is so drastically different from what Darkest Dungeon is going for. What was the differences and challenges that you face going between those two kind of different styles? Are they different to work on?
They are, but not so different from my perspective as you might think. So my role as a tech artist is not to create models.
Right.
There's an artist who does that. My role is to tell the engine how to light the models or how the shadow falls on the models, which makes a huge difference, or whatever effects. So in both games in Unity, So it's collaborating closely with the artists of, what is the feel you want? Because I think a lot of what I do is like contributing majorly to the vibes of the game. Like it's hard to point to one like specific thing because I didn't make a model that's in the game. I didn't make a texture that's in the game, but I made vibes during the game.
Right.
It's more about the implementation of the assets and making sure that everything becomes a coherent whole. Question mark? I have no idea if what I just said made sense.
A lot of my role is part of it is the artistic element of making everything look the way the artists want it to. Like I'm working on a project right now. It's a comic book style game. And so they're very concerned with it looking like a comic book and being lit like a comic book and everything having that aesthetic. And that's not something that any engine does out of the box. So like a lot of what I was doing was making lighting that works this way or making shaders, things that tell the computer how to draw a mesh that fit this style. But another big part of my role is making sure that the game is performant, as I mentioned, because especially when you're in 3D, like you run up against limitations even on powerful devices pretty quickly. So you have to figure out sort of a clever way to make it look like you haven't been limited to the player when actually you are working within constraints.
I see. I feel like I'm like unboxing Pandora's box right now and trying to comprehend at the same time.
Oh, sorry.
I
can explain more in detail.
Oh no! For me, I'm just happy to like actually uncover how this all works because like for years, it's one of those things where it's for years it's like, oh yeah, I know what this is, but deep inside I'm like I have no fucking clue, and now I'm just like learning about it, and it feels like I'm like actually understanding it. Specifically the performance part. I never really thought about it, but yeah, of course this is all stuff that would be insane for performance.
Yeah. So it's like, gameplay programmer can say, I did the gameplay, and an artist can say, I did the art. And it's kind of hard for me to like point to something specific in the game of that was me, but okay, so it doesn't crash on your computer, it doesn't lag. That was me. You're welcome. But I was going to say, actually, another part of my job is solving problems that may not be specifically aesthetic related. I'll give it as an example. We found sometimes in Among Us VR, if the player did something just so the camera gets stuck inside the little character. I call them critters. I know people call them Among Us's, but I call them critters. Camera got stuck in the critter. So I made the shader for that character. If the camera was inside of it, not draw. So that the person could still see until they like got out of whatever weird wedge that they had put themselves in.
Oh, I see.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah, should we go a bit more in detail on shaders? Because I think that's like a really big part.
Sure, I'd love to talk about shaders.
Yeah.
Shaders are like the one thing that's like the word I know. If somebody says like technical art, I'm like, oh yeah, shaders. Everybody has seen the classic Half-Life Alyx bottle with the water in it and the polygon article.
Well, I'm glad you asked because I was going to say one of my big projects is explaining shaders to people who don't know about shaders. So I'm always happy to talk about shaders. I interrupted you. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to reference another one that's like a big one. It's like Breath of the Wild. And like the way that the lighting works in that is, from my understanding, is done via like how the shader is drawing the meshes on like Link and all the other characters, etc.
See, that's the other problem when like shaders are it to somebody who doesn't understand them feels so unlimited because like just with those two examples, those are so drastically different. What is a shader and how does it work?
So a shader is a set of instructions we give the computer to tell it how to draw something. So in the context of a video game, you're going to see shaders basically in two ways. Now, I guess three ways. You see them on 3D objects. So telling computer how do you draw a 3D object. You see them on effects that are in the game, particles and so forth. And then you see them for how to draw the entire screen at once. For example, if you fade the screen to black, that's a effect that's on the entire screen. It can be done with a shader as well. So that's all it is. It's nothing fancy. It's just a set of instructions you give the computer on how to draw something. The technical definition is it's a program that runs on the GPU. Is what a shader is.
Oh, I see.
And you have to think a little differently when you write for a GPU versus a CPU, which is why a lot of people consider graphics programming to be difficult. I think, in my opinion, it's not any more difficult than any other kind of programming. It's just different. If you go from not knowing how to program to knowing how to program, you kind of have to change how you approach problems, and kind of reorganize what your sort of problem solving method would be to kind of suit the way you have to program. So that's why if you learn one programming language, then you're set. You can pick up pretty much any other because it's all the same weird way of thinking. But if you go from knowing how to program conventionally, like for a CPU, and you go to learning to program on the GPU, that process starts all over again. You have to retrain yourself of how to approach a problem. I'll give as an example. So CPU, what the CPU does is execute one instruction at a time really fast. What a GPU does is it executes a bunch of instructions at once really fast. And you can't know which of those happened first or whatever because they're happening at the same time.
Okay, it's simultaneous. I see.
So that's why they're so good for graphics, but also you see them used for like neural net stuff, processing like a bunch of, like a tensor is like an array of matrices. So it's just like a bunch of numbers. So processing those in parallel.
I remember tensor cores being like a big like selling point for like graphics cards. Was that a while ago, or is this new? I can't remember. But I do remember hearing that. Every year there's some new core that they're like, this is the one.
We've discovered a new one, and it's like, what the hell?
Conceptualize of what a shader can do and why we might want to use them over just telling the computer on the CPU how to draw everything. Imagine what we want is we want to draw a circle on the screen. So we need to write a program to send to the GPU to draw a circle on the screen. It has to be the same line of code no matter what pixel you're on. So we need to basically write, you could think of it as a function that no matter where you are, it runs the same code and it will draw a circle on the screen. So now a lot of people who are used to programming for sort of on the CPU side are thinking like, okay, I'll find like this coordinate for a circle and then I'll go down an angle on that coordinate and that coordinate, but you can't, because you can't know what pixel you're on when you're writing the equation. So how do you draw a circle? It's actually quite simple. If you take the distance of whatever pixel you're currently on to the center of the screen, you could say, well, if this distance is bigger than, let's say, half the width of the screen, make the screen black. Otherwise, make it white. And that's all you have to do. It'll draw a circle on the screen, if that makes sense.
It does. I feel insane, but yeah, it does. It does make sense.
What
the fuck?
I'm also interested in this other aspect of the technical artist role that I've heard is like really important, which is the documentation side of it, and actually being able to explain this, or like how to use tools and these kind of concepts to artists who might just be like, I just want to draw.
I just want to draw.
Yeah, a lot of my job is making tools for artists to use. So it's sort of programming things that never get seen by the player, but they're seen by the artists. And that's an interesting thing because you make a tool and then people ask you to support it, and you can get annoyed when you're asked to like fix a tool that you wrote. You think, I wish I'd never written this tool. Now I'm being bugged about it. But no, it's important to support the artists. And I always remind myself like that is my job ultimately, is not to make something for the player, but to make something for the artists. And they're the ones who are going to like make the magic that the player sees. So I can't get all like, oh, I don't want to help the darn artists again, because I'm not more important than them just because I can program and they can't.
Yeah, power to the players. Come on.
As far as documentation goes, no.
No.
People say it happens, but they're lying if they do.
Okay. So it's more like on the fly, like it, kind of support,
yeah.
Like, oh, I don't know how to use this. Okay, this is how you use this. All right, I'm gonna go work on my thing now.
Like I'll make a Google Doc. This is how you use the tool I wrote, so stop bothering me about it.
Gotcha.
I wouldn't say I've comprehend. I mean, when I was a contractor, actually, I did because I was paid like by the hour. So it's like, sure.
Yeah, it's like, well,
I'll do your documentation.
For sure.
I'm interested in the differences there actually between contract work, because we've kind of gone into this before when we were talking about QA, but like I'm interested in from a perspective of a technical artist, like the differences between working in-house versus the contractor role.
Yeah, that's fascinating because when I'm brought in as a contractor on a game, and I still have a few clients, which I shouldn't take, but I do despite my better judgment if the project's interesting enough, because I have a full-time job. But When you're brought on as a contractor, as a graphics programmer, it means the team couldn't afford to hire one. So you're looking at, indie teams, and I bill what my time is worth, but I don't advertise my services. People know about me from word of mouth, so they know that, I'm going to do a good job. So they kind of trust that it's worth the money, and it is, because I get it done fast and well. But the money's dear to them. It's very precious to them. So if I tell them you should do this, they will do it. If I suggest that they, look into whatever, they will look into that. And so I sort of don't need to shout to be heard, so to speak. Whereas I've found as a salaried employee, not through anybody's fault or maliciousness, but just everybody's busy and thinking about their own thing, and nobody's thinking about how much I get paid per hour. I sometimes have to insist, especially on performance related things, of this isn't going to work. We need to find a different solution, and finding I need to repeat myself, because unfortunately, and I do that, we don't like to hear things that we don't want to be true.
Yeah. And I'm interested in that as well. Like, is at what stage in like projects is it just like at any stage that they'll bring on like, okay, we need a graphical programmer, a graphics programmer, or a technical artist, like at this point? Or is it like usually like at the beginning of development when they're like sitting out to like what to do, etc.?
So when I've been brought on as a contractor, it's been at two different stages. The most common one is near the end, where something is messed up and they don't know how to fix it, and they've exhausted everything else and they're just desperate. And that's kind of a funny situation to be in, because then you go in and you unscrew up what's wrong.
Right.
What's nice is if it's something really easy, you do it fast. I love it, even though it doesn't make me a lot of money. I love it when I can solve the client's problem in like 1 hour. Like this thing that's been bugging them.
Yeah, it feels good.
But the other common situation is, especially as a contractor, to be brought in early, where they're designing the look of the game, the feel of the game. And so they want the shaders right then and there. Like, for example, my work on I Am Your Beast was pretty early in the project. To create the shader, it has that cool texture and stuff, because that was very important to the aesthetic of the game.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I find as a salaried employee, a lot more of my focus is on performance, which involves kind of like a lot of trial and error and grindy things. When I'm a contractor, nobody wants to spend the money on
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But it's important. It's important.
And like I assume the team you're working with now is like relatively quite a bit bigger than like some of these like smaller indie outlets that are doing like the contractor work. Is there like a lot of difference in like your role when the team size like expands, etc., and like how many different like people you have to interact with for everything to go smoothly?
Well, like for example, Shell Games has something like 170 employees. And they work on several projects at once. So the teams for the projects I found have been about the same size as a lot of the indie projects I've worked on. One difference is, especially between me and a different engineer, is I bounce between projects a lot at the studio, because it's often the case that a game doesn't need graphic support all of the time. But when they do need it, they really need it. Because graphics programming is considered difficult, so graphics programmers are rare. In fact, I'm the graphics programmer at Shell right now. They're looking for another, so apply if you want to do it. But
I see. I was gonna that was what I was gonna ask. Like, how does it ever happen that you have to collaborate with other people? With that, I feel like that just kind of explains it. Yeah.
I mean. Yeah, I do have to collaborate with people. Well, especially...
but
you mean like other graphics programmers?
I mean like other graphics programmers is what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah, well, especially if like, for example, you are working with an outside team for whatever reason. I'm not going to get too specific in my example because it's under NDA. But if your team were to be working with a team that was outside the company, you're dealing with like their graphics people and your graphics people. Oh, actually, I can talk about something. I worked on Partyverse, the Facebook game. Shoot, I can only remember the code name that was used by in the company, but it's shipped, so I can talk about it. It's the VR Partyverse game. I can't believe I forgot the name of the game. I wrote the shaders part. But that was we were working with Meta on that, because Meta has their avatars, and they wanted us to use the avatars in the game. So that was all their engineering. So we had to talk to them, make sure that their avatar system was compatible with like the systems we were making.
And like, what are like the day-to-day challenges that you're facing? Is it like very like just like depends on the project? Like, okay, this thing's going for this, so I'm gonna have to, or is it like you feel like pretty comfortable? Like, okay, this is I've done this kind of thing before.
Well, like for example, a project, I can't say what it is, but I'm working on a port right now. And so I'm not creating anything. I'm just making stuff work. And that's not super fun, but it's necessary. And, you're going to eventually bring joy to people, but it's most fun when you're on a project where you are creating something or, you are implementing an artist's idea. So currently my day-to-day is, I work remotely. So I wake up, I go to the morning meetings, and then I am focused on the unfun task of porting. But on other projects, wake up, go to the meetings, and then I'm writing shaders or I'm helping artists solve a problem, writing a tool for artists or writing a shader for artists. And that's fun. I enjoy that.
How much creative input do you have like when on those projects that are a bit like smaller and you get to really implement an artist's visions?
Not all that much, unfortunately.
I see.
The thing is, especially if you're brought on as a contractor, they don't want your opinion, which I understand. Because like, if I had a problem and I brought in a contractor to solve something in my game, I don't want them telling me how to like make my game.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, this is ugly. What are you guys doing?
Yeah. What are you doing here?
So I made that mistake on some of the first things I contracted on, and I realized in hindsight, oh no, that was kind of rude. Like, I didn't mean to be rude, but I realized, if I'm bringing on someone to solve my problem, I'd be embarrassed if they told me like, no, it doesn't look.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
I think when I've been working on projects as a salaried employee, I've had a bit more latitude to be like, and I think we should try this, or it should look like this, but also more latitude to be overruled. But where I would put in creative input is, I think the light should be like this, the shadow should be like that, or we should do this effect or that effect. I wouldn't be like designing characters or anything.
Kind of mentioned like ray tracing and stuff like that. Like, do you have input onto what kind of like technical effects are going to be like possible in the game? Is that something that you're consulted on and like, okay, we want to do ray traced global illumination, and you're like, okay, well then we can't have this or whatever to hit our marks.
I've never worked on a game that has tried to leverage ray tracing. I'm primarily a Unity engineer, so
Gotcha.
That's not my area of expertise.
Yeah, not specifically like ray tracing, but I guess like scoping for projects, right? Like, like deciding what kind of like techniques you guys are going to use and what best suits the I guess the outline for what the game is.
Yeah, well, like for example, when I was brought on for I Am Your Beast, I was shown like a bunch of reference images for the look that they wanted, and they said like, we want to have shadows that have a texture that blends. How do we achieve this? So talking to them about, how can you make that work? A case like sometimes I'll be working on a project and the artists have set up a test scene and they have like 1 million lights in it, and I'd be like, you can't have all those lights. You have to get rid of some of those lights. There's too many lights, and that's a little sad for the artists, but it has to be done. I have to be the don't have fun person.
But I guess that can also be fun and interesting in like another way, because it's like, okay, how can we achieve the same kind of effect we're going for with like the limited resources that we actually have, right? Like you got to be more creative with your lighting implementation. For
sure. Oh, and especially in VR where like most of the time you don't have shadows because it's just like it's possible, but it's almost never done in a VR title that's for like a mobile device and not like tethered because they're so expensive. So how do we make the game look good even though there are no shadows? But there are a lot of really beautiful VR games. Actually, the first that comes to mind is Walkabout Mini Golf, which is actually a very beautiful game with no shadows. But think about it, because it's that misdirection. That's that magician's misdirection there of if, your eye is being drawn by other things, you don't even think about the shadows.
Yeah, no, that I didn't even, I'm like looking at screenshots of it now and I wouldn't have even thought about it. That's crazy. Yeah. There's just things about like, people complain like, why can't I see my body? And it's like, well.
Especially when it comes to VR, people are so annoying about it.
Oh, yeah. Because people expect the same fidelity they get on a PC.
Yeah.
But like, you have to realize most people at least are not going to. So there's always obsessive people who are going to compare side by side with what's on a PC.
Oh, for sure.
But most people don't do that.
Right. Yeah.
You just need to make it look good for them in the moment and not compared to a PC game. I know there's there's like on YouTube side by side videos of games and their Switch ports, and the Switch ports, don't look as good. I'm like, don't do that.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen the same thing for like, if we're talking VR, like the one that comes to mind is like Resident Evil 4 Remake versus Resident Evil 4 Remake VR, and they don't look the same, and the comments are like, what the hell happened? And it's like, what do you think happened?
Well, it's kind of like,
like completely different.
People doing like freeze frames of movies or whatever and finding something that's wrong in the movie, but you can only notice it if you froze the frame. It's like, well, if you didn't notice while you were watching the movie like a normal person, then it's fine.
It's such a ridiculous thing to say.
Sweet. All right. I've got just like one more question, which is just like a more general one. Is what would your advice be to like someone who's listening who's like, okay, I want, like, this sounds like something I want to get into, but like they don't really know how to, and like what the pathways are to get into tech art?
I would say don't wait, start today. Just start playing with it, even if you're not good at it. I always tell people it's not that I'm a genius or something, it's that I've screwed up way more than most other people have at this. That's why I'm so good at it.
I mean, that's everything, isn't it? Just like I messed up so hard so often. I looked like a fool so many times, and that's how I got here. Because God knows, like, even with me with like audio engineering and everything, like I've messed up so bad in front of my bosses and wanted to explode on the spot, and now I'm here. I survived. You will survive too. You can mess up.
So graphics programming is fun because you can actually see the results right away visually, and you'll see yourself mess up visually. Don't be discouraged. Keep doing it. Keep messing up. That's the way to go.
A good thing I will say is in the description to this video, I believe it would be a good idea to put the shader documentation that you just sent.
Yeah. Are there any other resources that you would recommend for people getting into it? Like,
absolutely. It depends on the type of shader programming they want to do and the sense of what their goals, like what they want to get out of it. Because something we didn't discuss too much today is like demo scene and golfing, code golf. Like there are people who write shaders that are basically what we would call full screen effects in video games, where it doesn't go on a 3D object, it just draws something. And so the goal is to like make something that looks cool or beautiful and as little code as possible. And so there are competitions for this, and it's a lot of fun.
That's cool as hell.
Make something cool. Beautiful. Have you heard of ShaderToy? ShaderToy.com?
No.
It's a website where people just write shaders that don't do anything except look cool. And I love it. And so the way the site works is you're forced to put the code public along with the thing. So you can see how everybody's doing everything. So it's like, if your goal is just to make something cool, I would say start with a website called The Book of Shaders. And I'm sure I'll send the link. I'll send it to y'all so you can link it.
I'm on Shader Toy right now, and I immediately understand. This is cool as hell. What? This is awesome. We'll definitely leave a link for that.
So that uses a shader language called GLSL. So yeah, I recommend the Book of Shaders for that. And then if you want to get started for video games, it's different, different concerns. If you want to make shaders for video games, I recommend my own tutorials. And I also recommend, there is a guy who writes shaders. His name is Harry Ellis Vakis, and his stuff is really good. I think he calls the series Technically Art. And then there's another great shader tutorial writer whose handle is Minions Art, and she makes really incredible stuff as well that's really great for beginners. So those are my recommendations.
Hell yeah. And then other than that, just download a game engine and start figuring things out.
You don't even have to know how to program. It's like Unity's newest render pipelines has a node editor where you just like cook things up visually. And your P has always and Unreal Engine has always had a node editor. So don't wait to know how to program. Get started now.
Hell yeah. It's perfect. All right. Billy, do you have any other questions you wanted to...
I actually have one because it just came to me like while we were talking about drawing an image in front of like on the camera. I don't know if that's technically how it works, but that's how it works in my brain. When is UI part of that?
Yeah, well, so actually what you said is basically correct. Of when we do a full screen effect, we're taking like the output of the camera and stamping something else on top of it.
Oh, I see.
So yeah, so UI itself, like the UI itself would not be a shader. The UI is made of like individual images basically On a modern game, everything is drawn by a shader ultimately. You would have to go back 20 years or more to get a game that doesn't draw things with shaders, because a shader is just a program that runs on the GPU.
I see.
If you go back to the 90s, a lot of games you played did all the graphics on the CPU because that's all they had.
Yeah. I remember we talked with we talked about translation work like on old games and how they basically had to hack into the game because it was on the CPU instead of like the GPU. It was like a whole thing. I can't explain that. It's so much. But the way they explained it was like the way they used to do it was unique. And basically they had to hack into it just to replace text from Japanese to English and all that. And it blew my mind completely.
Well, you sort of, you go back far enough in time, everything's the Wild West. There's no standardized way of doing things. So everybody is solving things on their own.
Sweet. Damn.
Is there anything else you wanted to shout out before we let you go?
Just thank you so much for having me, and thanks to Sam for connecting us.
Sweet. Awesome.
Absolutely. Shout out to Sam. This is like the first time in my life where I actually feel like I understood what every technical artist is. So that's pretty crazy.
That makes me so happy.
Crap. My mind is like, galaxy brain right now. I feel like I opened my chakras. I have a third eye and everything, and the third eye draws things in front of my camera. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Go to Shader Toy right now and make a circle shader. You know how to now, so
yeah, that's right. I just need to visualize it with my third eye. While you guys were gaming, I was over here making games because I just started doing hobbyist game dev on the side.
Hell yeah, dude.
Because I was talking about this a bit earlier, but I kind of hit the... You guys know what the Dunning-Kruger effect is? To explain the Dunning-Kruger effect, it's basically this...
It's a theory of learning.
It's a theory on your level of competence and confidence when you don't know anything and when you become a master at specifically for me, it's the creative field of music because, I've been making music for like 15 years. So I'm kind of like, there's like this plateau of sustainability, they call it, which is basically when you start plateauing and not really learning any more things. And it takes a really long time until you like go up and like progress and learn more things. And it's not the most fun anymore for me to make music. I needed something new to put my creative energy in. And after like so many fucking episodes of talking with developers, like solo devs, and like small indie studios, and also just talking with people in our everyday life that are doing hobbyist game dev, and they talk about how like it's actually really easy to get into, blah blah blah. I was like, fuck it, I'll take the plunge. One morning I just woke up. I was like, I'm just gonna jump in. I'm gonna get Godot. I'm gonna do this little. They have like a web app called GD Quest. It's like basically a game to learn how to script with the Godot scripting language called GD Script, and I think it's like game development script, and it's not that bad to learn because GD Script is basically it's literally made for game development, so it gets rid of a lot of the fluff from other scripting languages so that it's only stuff that is pertinent to making games. And it's also very close to was it Java, or what's the Unity one? Is it Java that Unity uses?
I think it's C#
or whatever. I don't know. I'm learning still. It's been like 2 weeks.
Or no, maybe that's Unreal. I don't know.
No, Unity is C#. Just look it up.
It is C#. Okay, yeah. So it's very close. It's very close to C#, but it's different enough in like a lot of different places. So you do have to learn its own thing. And yeah, no, it's been really fun. I've been working on this. I've been working on a first-person horror game, and it's been 2 weeks. It's basically a lot of. I'm not very quick on this. If I'm honest, I don't really like scripting. Scripting is more like a means to an end to get to a product that I find fun, or to get to the fun bits of game dev, like making something look good and feel good. Once you program something like, I don't know, the character speed or the this or that or the camera shake when you like shoot your gun, you can actually like tweak it and make sure that it's exactly how you want it. Those parts of just tweaking something until it feels just right, that's the parts that I find really fun, because we're going to be talking about this later, but I've been tweaking a lot, like cartoon shaders, making shadows, hard lights, and all that stuff. It's been really fucking fun, and it's been very freeing. It hasn't been impossible to get into like you would think. It hasn't been like this giant wall that you just have to smash your head in a bunch until you can actually go through and have a product at the end. It's very accessible. It's very easy to get into it.
I feel like a lot of people get walled off, well, not walled off, but like stop before they even get to the point of, you know, that they'll download a game engine or something, and then they'll open it up and get overwhelmed immediately. How did you like avoid that kind of
Well, okay, if I'm
experience?
honest, here's what I did. What I did was I started learning code with GD script, and after that, then I downloaded Godot.
Gotcha.
And when I was in Godot, I do have like some friends that I would message from time to time to be like, hey, how do you do this? Hey, how do you do that? That like I've had help from them, but the big thing is I've already done projects in Blender and in Unity before then because of my game audio background. So that kind of very much helped. Apart from that, it was just watching YouTube videos about things I wanted to do instead of just though, because you know, when you want to learn a program, a lot of the times you get like beginner's guide to this.
Yeah.
And I find like that is the most boring fucking video that you can watch if you want to get into something, because those videos are just front loaded with information that they become like your eyes glaze over and you're like, oh my God, there's so much that's really fucking boring. So what I just did was literally I went in and I was just like, okay, Godot FPS controller, or like how to make an FPS controller, and that's how like I would watch the entire video. And then I would go back in Godot and try a few things. The game I want to work on right now, it uses 2D meshes in a 3D environment. So then I looked up like, okay, how to do billboarded sprites in 3D. And then I did those. And I basically been learning how to do a lot of the game dev by just watching videos that were relevant at the time where I was in the project. Like if I had an idea for the game, I would watch a video on how to implement that. I find that more valuable of an experience than going into a video that's going to be just like, so in the file menu, there is a save button, there is a and it's like, well, that's fucking boring. I'm never going to get past this. So basically, like how I learn is literally just immersion and just throwing yourself in it.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, that's how I got into it. Obviously, it helps a lot to have somebody to check my code and be like, "What the fuck are you writing?" Because I'm gonna be honest, scripting is not something that comes naturally to me at all. A lot of times when I would talk to programmers, they would be like, you know. Like computers are really fucking stupid, and when you give them instructions, you basically have to give them instruction. You have to talk to them like they're fucking stupid.
Right.
You have to give them these scripting instructions like they are literally the dumbest people alive, because they are. And you basically have to change the way you think on giving a computer instructions. And in my head, I was like, I understood what they meant by that, but starting programming, I didn't understand. You know, it feels like there was so much more to it. When you have a problem, the solution is you have to change the entire way your brain works. You basically have to talk to an entity that is so fucking stupid and that will literally do everything you tell it to do. And do you guys know? You guys know those? There's this horror movie, I can't remember what, but it's like this Wishmaster. It's a genie, and when you wished something, he would take it literally, and then it would always end in somebody dying because it was a horror movie. It's basically like that constantly with the fucking game engine. Like you're giving these instructions, and it will do the worst possible outcome all the time. I don't know. It's just weird. You just have to think in a completely different way. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up today was because, you know, now that I know a bit more about programming, I'm in no ways good at it. I'm fucking trash at it. but I have started to pick up on like behind the magic. Like it feels like the curtains have like opened, and now I understand how the magic trick works for how video games work. It's basically just matryoshka of like all these nodes and components that become a whole. And it feels really weird to play the new Call of Duty campaign because I kind of see. It sounds insane, but I was playing the new Call of Duty campaign this week, which is excellent, by the way, fantastic fucking game. And while I was playing the game, I had constant moments of just understanding how they made something that would seem absolutely insane to me before I started programming.
Like what?
It just like I remember. It was like specifically how, because I learned how to do finite state machines, I think they're called, which is basically how movement works for a player controller. So you would create a machine state. Or oh god, this is insane. I sound like a fucking psychopath. Math time. You create a state that's called walking, and then you create another one that's called crouching, and then you create another one that's called, I don't fucking know, running, dashing, this, that. Yeah. And you basically create these different states that the player controller can be in. While I was playing Call of Duty, I noticed those states being triggered whenever I would press buttons, and it would do like specific actions. And then I kind of started noticing how they would do a smooth transition from one state to the other. And
with the movement.
Yeah, like specifically it was the movement, because that was the thing I was working on at the time. I like when it comes to game events and all that, I'm still new to that, but just it felt so eye-opening to me in a weird way, and I don't know how to describe this feeling of just like understanding the magic behind, because it's not magic. It feels like magic when you don't understand it, but when you're playing it and you have a bit more knowledge on scripting and how games work, it feels so normal. Like, I don't know how to describe it. I sound insane.
It becomes within your grasp is what it feels like. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I can grasp how they've done these things. I just wanted to talk about how weird of a feeling this all is. Even with like how like objects interact, or how shaders work, because I was also doing research on how to make a cartoon shader for my game, because I wanted the shadows to be like hard shadows with a little bit of edge to it. So like you would have the hard black shadow with a little bit of gray leaking out, but it would only be hard grays with no like blur to it. Basically, this shit is crazy to me. Video games are nuts. I cannot believe how simple and how horrifying they are at the same time.
Right. That's the thing that I know that feeling. I've been going through a very similar thing of getting back into hobby game development, and recently started doing like low poly 3D work, because I've always been so intimidated by 3D modeling. I did it a little bit in college.
It's so scary, right?
It is.
I don't know why, but it's really jarring, because all you see online are people being like, this mesh fucking sucks. And then you're like, oh God, I would make a worse mesh. That looked fine to me.
Oh yeah. I mean, everything I've made so far is absolute trash, but I'm having a bunch of fun making it. And what the thing where you were talking about how much like of an illusion it all is, and like, you see through the magic of it. When you start making 3D models, you're like, oh my God, these are like, it's like literally just, there's just these hollow nothings that look like forms, and suddenly you're like, it's just a texture.
Fucking, you put the fucking block, you put the sphere in your game, you put that fucking mesh node, when you put it there and you see like, oh, it's a square. But like when you understand how that works and how it actually gets put into the game and how the graphics pipeline renders and puts that in the game, it feels fucking crazy. And it's all just an illusion. And it's so, you know, the people, okay, this, I'm going to sound fucking insane for a second. But when people would say like, oh, we live in a simulation, I would always be like, oh my God, Jesus, oh brother, you know, like fucking another one of these. But now that I know a bit more about programming, I'm like, oh my God, they might be onto something because I can see some weird parallels with real life and I sound insane.
At the very least, the way that we perceive the world around us is in a very similar way to the projected forms and
fucking weird.
shapes. It's weird. It's a very
it
weird.
feels insane to say, and I'm sure some people are going to be listening to this and actually think I'm full on losing.
I mean,
and I'm gonna be honest, I fucking might.
I think you're totally fine. I think you're just. It happens when you start learning to draw. Is all of a sudden learning to draw is in a lot of ways just learning to look at things.
Yeah.
And that feeling is really weird at first. You get used to it. It never really I don't know. It doesn't warp your reality in some psychedelic eternal way that you can never. It's just
Okay, yeah, it doesn't. I'm gonna be I was exaggerating a bit. I don't actually think maybe, I don't fucking know. What am I, God?
No, you're
my God, now I'm insane.
I mean, in the most basic thing is your brain is responding to the dopamine of the challenge and excitement of learning a new thing, and that's what's going on.
Yeah.
And you're making new connections, and that's exciting. And you're the way that you're interacting with the world around you, and then the games themselves it's all you're making different connections between those things that you never realized before.
especially the fucking stuff gameplay side of things. That stuff is I'm still kind of grasping with it, and whenever I get a big eureka moment, I feel fully crazy.
The one for me, so when I started making games, the one that really got me was realizing that everything that you see in any game ever, it's just math presented in a flashy way. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
And sometimes that math happens in real time. Sometimes that math happens in a turn-based fashion, but it's just math. Holy shit. Okay, there you go. That's making a game is easy, but making a video game is this whole other thing that has all these other layers of, visuals and graphics and audio and UI and all this other stuff.
It feels daunting as fuck, but it isn't daunting anymore.
No.
Now that I've actually, because I understand how it works now. It is math, but there are people making middleware, making it so simple. And I've just been really happy doing it. And I did it mostly for myself, for a creative outlet, and also because Press Start Turbo, it feels good to learn a bit more about game development, because we talk so much with game developers. It's been cool. I will say, if you ever wanted to get into a creative endeavor, I think that the way we described it earlier, where it's instead of throwing yourself into very dense, this is how the program works, this is what this does, that's what that does, just watch a tutorial on how to do the one thing you want to do and learn from there. Much more interesting.
I think it's also important to understand that most entertainment things that you can create, it's multidisciplinary.
Mm-hmm.
If you're listening to Billy talk about scripting and you're that sounds like fucking hell.
It is hell.
There's a lot of there's a lot of game development avenues you can go down that have nothing to do with that you can.
I just wanted to mention real quick that there's visual scripting out there. There is stuff like blueprints.
Inside of Godot, there's this plugin that transforms the way that scripting works into visual scripting.
Right.
So the nodes become actual nodes on a graph, and you can program stuff like that instead. There's also Scratch.
Yeah,
there's so much. You can use Scratch and Unreal blueprints in Godot as well.
Just as an example for anyone who's okay, but is that any different? What can you do with it? It's a lot of drag and drop clicking things, and there is some minor code, but very minimal. Some good examples of games made with that are the Bloodborne remake and Nightmare Cart.
Yeah.
Lilith just uses visual scripting. So it's not impossible to make a really cool thing without writing a line of code.
There's this game called Small Saga. It was made in this game engine that doesn't have any scripting.
Yeah.
All the programming is done through like blocks that you link together.
Is that Construct? Is that what that's
Is it
called?
Construct?
3D Construct
I
or
think-
whatever?
3D Construct? I don't know. It is just a game engine with zero scripting.
Yeah.
It's just nodes. And they made this really good JRPG about little rats with with fucking pocket knives, and it's awesome. And they didn't program any of it.
Oh shit, I
It's
do know
cool.
that game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really cool. It's really cool. It looks great. And there's zero. It was made 100% with no scripts. There is scripting, but get into game dev. It's fun. If you've ever thought like, oh, I want to get into it, but it seems daunting. It really isn't that daunting. You can get also quite fucking frankly, if you don't want a script, go on fucking YouTube and steal somebody else's open source script. Who cares?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like there's so much. I made a game in RPG Maker, dude. Like, that's
RPG Maker is also a really fucking good way to get into making games.
so many cool games are made with that people don't even realize. Like, what's that Felvedek game? That was made in RPG Maker.
Fear and Hunger is made in that.
Fear and Hunger, exactly. Yeah,
There was this game that came out a few years ago. Omori was made in RPG Maker. Like Omori doesn't. There, like you can feel a bit of like the RPG Maker-iness, but everything else about the combat system feels very, very distinct and unique. And also, just in general, like we literally talked about how good RPG Maker is for making horror games last episode.
yeah. Like, and it's there's so many things that you can do. Like I made a 3D dungeon crawler in that game, or in RPG Maker, because there's a 3D plugin.
What?
Yeah. And that's
What?
Yeah. That's what I've been making my next game with is that. So like
I didn't even know that was a thing. That's so sick.
yeah. Dude, like there's so many things out there.
There's so many resources and like people making videos on how to use the resources that they made.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was the other thing I was going to say is if you're not an artist, go on itch.io and there's like
Oh my God,
very
asset-
affordable to free assets just on
Yeah.
there you can use.
I've been using a bunch of fucking prototyping assets that I found on the Godot store.
Yeah. You do that, or Open Game Art is another one.
Yeah.
OpenGameArt.gov or not gov. I'm OpenGameArt.org. Sorry.
The US government wants you to be a gamer.
Yes. Go make games. But anyway, yeah, there's stuff out there, and like it's not impossible to cobble together like a minimum viable product in a very short amount of time using the aid of things that are freely available from others. Like it's totally within your reach. And also like games can be so many different things.
Yeah.
Like you could make a Twine game that you like roll dice on. It's like a role-playing, like tabletop role-playing thing in Twine, which is a like an interactive fiction platform where you can have like images and text and whatnot, and dialogue trees, all this sort of thing. And all you're doing is you're writing out the text that appears, and then you're making another little box, and you're linking between them with an if-then statement, and it's nothing.
Yeah.
It's so easy.
For people who want to make visual novels, RenPy is a fucking amazing way to get into it. And also, like, you can do shit in RenPy. Like, there's this game that I've done music for and I've done voice acting for called Cryptid Crush, and that game is a fucking full-on JRP, like tabletop JRPG inside of RenPy.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Is like you can bend and break these things that maybe aren't traditionally for a certain genre.
But people make free add-ons to break them, and they make resources for you to use it. So if you think that it could be possible for you to do a thing in a game engine that you want to learn, honestly, it's probably possible because game developers are insane, and also they make everything free for some reason. Yeah, no, it's cool. I've been enjoying the process. Go make a game.
What do you want to talk about, Brendan?
I want to talk about making a game.
Oh, no way.
No way.
To kind of build off of a lot of what we've been talking about, there's a lot of synergy, both between some of the stuff we're talking about with Monster Hunter and also like getting back into game dev and all that sort of thing. So I guess for listeners who don't know, I don't know if have I been on the show since I was hired full time at GameSpot?
At GameSpot?
I don't think so.
I
think we've talked like behind the scenes, like I contributed some stuff for some episodes, but so I'm now a full-time editor at GameSpot. And before then, you know, being a freelancer, I would have like long periods of like very little to no work, and then like periods of a lot of work. And now I'm just in a long, prolonged period of a lot of work. And so my free time has dried up. I haven't been making YouTube videos as much as I would like to. And in my mind for like the last literally like 5 or 6 years has been this game idea. And I made a little like dungeon crawler in 30 days just to kind of like, that was a couple of years ago I did that. And that was an effort to like kickstart my creative juices and get working on this game again, and kept getting backburnered over and over again. And a combination of just realizing that like I just don't have as much free time anymore, and I want to make this game, and playing games that are reminding me of why I wanted to make this game. I've just decided like I'm going to go for it again. And one of the big motivating factors was, it sounds funny, but like playing Monster Hunter Wilds, the beta, it reminded me of Metal Gear Solid 5, right? And that also reminded me of Death Stranding, because so much of Metal Gear Solid 5 kind of morphed and evolved into what Death Stranding is. And all of these games have this loop of like, you know, taking on a mission and gearing up for the mission, going and doing it, hoping that you have enough of, you know, whatever, enough potions or whatever to make it to the end of the hunt or the end of the delivery, or if something like Dragon's Dogma, like the end of the quest, you know, without like taking too much damage and all this shit. And then going back and doing it all again, this loop. And, you know, you get that in stuff like Wizardry and you know, even stuff like Breath of the Wild kind of has moments of that. I really like that loop, right? And just finding it very compelling. And what I like so much about Death Stranding is it applies that to the navigation of the world, right? And I find navigation to be one of the most fun and interesting things for me to do in a video game. I like figuring out how to get to and from a place, and I like it when the game pushes back on the player and makes you have to like really engage and pay attention to things like foot placement or, you know, climbing stamina meters and anything like that. I find that stuff to be really enjoyable. I like weapon durability. I like all that sort of resource management.
Love friction.
I love friction.
We love friction.
I love it. That's why Dragon's Dogma is my favorite game of this year. But another game that I really liked this year, it was called Scald Against the Black Priory. And what that game does is it does like the Baldur's Gate style or even Ultima style of CRPG stuff, you know, where you're dice rolling to overcome things. But it, you know, obviously it mostly does that in dialogue and combat. But it also applies to stuff like, can you climb up this cliff? Or are you going to need to go find a rope to figure out how to get up? Like, and so many RPGs apply the role playing, like the stats, the dice rolling, the whatever, to combat, and maybe in like a CRPG,
a little bit of like conversational stuff from
And I've been so fascinated, like literally for years, even before like stuff like Death Stranding, but it really brought it to the fore in my mind. And what is the core of this idea of like wanting to design a game is like applying those role-playing, dice rolling, stat check type of things to things like, you know, walking through a rapids in a river or something like that. Yeah. And creating like interesting things that happen if you fail it, as much as it, you know, like, are you going to just take damage, or is it going to like push you down like, you know, a few like if it's a grid-based dungeon crawler, it's going to push you down a few tiles in the dungeon, and then you're in a different location, and now you have to figure out like, how am I going to move forward from here? Or maybe if your character has like a grappling hook or an ability to get over like some sort of obstacle, does that open you up to like getting an early advantage or something? And so that sort of game design idea, like applying an RPG, like that sort of like stat-based stuff to the world and the environment and the navigation, has just really been very exciting to me. And, you know, I just really want to make something with that, even if it's like a really small idea. And like I have like, you know, art and setting and lore ideas of like the world I would like this to take place in, but really the core of it is that sort of like, that world navigation focused RPG.
I really hope you're not the only person thinking about this, Brendan, because if there's a game that I want people to steal from more, it's Death Stranding.
Disco Elysium?
No, Death Stranding
I'm gonna be
specifically.
honest, just to bring it back just for a second, the stuff about you saying like, oh, a dice roll decides like stuff like that, the immediate thing I was thinking about was Disco Elysium, because I feel like Disco Elysium does that. Oh, I guess it's only in conversational stuff.
But it's close. I mean, Disco Elysium...
Because some actions you want to take, sometimes you have to roll a dice and it will drastically change your playthrough.
Yeah, no, I actually bring up, so in a couple years ago when I made that like 30-day dungeon crawler, I made a video kind of post-mortem about how and why I did it. And I bring up Disco Elysium and, oh gosh, the name is escaping me, the Cyberpunk tabletop RPG with like the hand-drawn art. I can't...
Shadowrun?
No, it's like you're playing as an android, and like you're an android of a person who like made you to do their work for them. Anyway, I can't find it. But anyway, so yeah, Disco Elysium was one of the games that I was like really inspired by because of the way it handles just small interactions throughout the world, and the idea of applying that to things like, you know, like I said, like crossing a river or something, or even something like coming across like a foothold in a wall and trying to boost up to the next floor early, and like just applying the stuff that you normally do in combat to other things. And also another idea is kind of changing how like instead of it being like the only thing that you're randomly encountering is monsters, what if some of that was like, okay, yeah, so I'm walking through this river and then I have a random encounter with rapids, and the abilities that I'm using are things like steadying my footing and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, it is that combat loop, but the context is different. And I just find that sort of thing very interesting.
And like I love the way that preparation and planning ties into that, especially like if you're talking about the Death Stranding one, where like there are so many times in that game where, you know, when you're sitting out for a delivery, you're not just choosing, you know, like how your packages are placed and like the weight distribution. You're also deciding on like, you know, what stuff you're bringing with you, and that adds more weight to you. Yeah. And like can put you off balance. So like, you know, it might be like if I want to take 2 ladders with me, like I'm going to be out of weight. So like, oh, okay, I'm only going to bring 1. But then you come across this giant lake that it's like, okay, I would have to walk all the way around to the shallow point, or I could, you know, put a ladder across the lake and then get across that way. And it's really interesting, like that the way that, you know, your planning and your preparation like fundamentally changes the way that you interact with the world and like the options that you have. And I think like applying that to that kind of dice rolling or decision making, and like having it about those kind of having it in that context is a really interesting way to go with those kind of ideas.
Yeah. And the thing is, like in Death Stranding 2, you can fail forward in that game a lot, right? Like failure is frustrating in a game like Death Stranding, and you can fail, you know, mission critical things and you have to restart, whatever. But that doesn't really happen that often. What mostly happens is, okay, you dropped your packages, you fell down a cliff. Now you have to figure out a way to get back up the cliff. And that's frustrating from like a traditionally how we think about gameplay and fail states. Like same thing with Dark Souls. Like, okay, I lost my souls in this boss and I didn't collect it back in time and I died again. That's frustrating. But I also find there's so much opportunity for like interesting problem solving there of like, okay, I screwed myself up. How do I get myself out of this bad situation?
Yes.
And it's like, it's why I find something like No Man's Sky to be really compelling, because it's like, oh, I got lost on this planet. How the hell do I get off of it? That sort of mindset is probably my favorite thing in a game. Or like in Dragon's Dogma, right? Of being like, okay, I got to make it all the way here to do this quest. Holy shit, dude. How am I going to get there in the most efficient way without running into this extremely powerful dragon that I know is out there? Like, that sort of risk reward system is so, I love it so much.
My other like favorite part about that is that it generates so many different stories for the players and like the experiences that you can have and how different, like say we're both, the objectives are the same for me and you, but the way that we go about it and like us, the things that we have problems with, the route we take is different, and that generates like, you're like, oh my god, and it actually makes you feel, at least in my perspective, like I'm more, like that you've had a more individual experience and like you're able to share that with someone else and like be like, oh my god, that like you tackled this in a completely different way. I didn't even realize you could do something like that.
That's like the type of friction that really, really makes me happy with or that really I found really interesting with Dragon's Dogma, because it like modernizes a lot of those aspects, and it just feels good to like get into a call and talk about it for hours. That's like the best feeling ever.
I really have been enjoying my time with Metaphor, ReFantazio, right?
Yeah.
It's a really cool game. And there are like, there are ways you can do things differently, right? But ultimately, you're probably going to go through the dungeons the same way. And the boss strategies are probably mostly similar. You might have to like, okay, I don't have a very good build for this. I have to work around it. But also, if you fail, maybe you just change your build to the optimized one and move forward. There's not as much of that personalized expression that comes from friction like that. And I know it's not for everybody, but it's definitely for me. And it's something that like, it's why I love stuff like Wizardry as well. It's any sort of friction that really forces you to pay attention. It's good for my ADHD addled brain. So I'll actually pay attention to a game when it's like that. And that's the thing. Yeah. Like, again, just to go back to Death Stranding, one of the reasons I'm very fond of that game, and I have a lot of hope for the next one, but I'm so fond of it because it's a game that like requires so much attention, and I really click with games that are like that. If a game is a little bit too passive, I find myself falling off of it faster. Whereas like something like, Death Stranding or Dragon's Dogma, these are games like I'll go back to over and over and over again, or Monster Hunter or whatever. I'll put, 1,000 hours into it in like, a single long, that's the only game I'm playing for like a few months or something, because of that. So, but anyway, that was just mostly because when we were talking about, Billy was reaching out and talking about like art and game design and stuff. And I was like, oh man, this is exactly where my brain is right now. So it feels good to finally like kind of express some of this. And I hope I can make some videos along the way as I'm doing it. But like my free time is so limited now that if I'm going to do
good
anything,
luck with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, good luck with that, chump.
It's so limited now that the only thing that I really like want to spend it on is that game. So yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a great place to be at creatively, though. Like when that is the, when you do have that limited free time, that it's so compelling to you that is the thing that you're going to spend it on. Yeah. That like, you got a passion.
Yeah. I understand that, because it's all I've been thinking about, even though I've been so fucking busy recently. And all I think about is like, oh man, how would I solve this very specific problem in the game I want to make?
And the nice thing is like, once I get some headway on it, worst comes to worst, and GameSpot has more layoffs. I mean, hey, I got something fun to do in my free time.
Oh my God, Jesus!
I'm just trying to find the silver lining here.
Silver lining is true. A lot of finding the silver lining recently. I've noticed.
That's all we can do, man.
Howdy! Thanks so much for listening. This episode would not have been possible without the help from our patrons, such as Alan Diver, Bland But Funny, Boo Poo Loo, Brain Soup, Brass, Cassandra Crash, Chips, Chris Chapman, Diamante Yogurt, DX Studios, Edward McMillan, Eric Scott Gillies, Ethereal, Geef, Generic Phoenix, Guy Beam, Invictus Echo, Jaybird, Lambda Man, Leo the Geotech, Mr. Starchy, Mr. Shirt, Pharmacy Fruit Bat, Preston Husk, Random Diamonds, Rat Supreme, Ryan Rocket, Spherical May, The Frost Days, Ulbert, Wool 9455, and Woodstock. I tried to add a little bit of flair at the end there. A little bonus thank you for you guys supporting us. Hopefully you like this episode, and we'll see you next time.